So off to this now, former Finance Minister Tito Mboweni will be laid to rest in his home village in Tzaneen in Limpopo tomorrow. He died on Saturday at the Johannesburg hospital after short illness. President Cyril Ramaphosa has declared a special official funeral, Category 2, for the former minister. The former Reserve Bank spokesperson and a friend of Mboweni, Professor Hlengani Mathebula, is now joining us to have a conversation ahead of the funeral. Prof, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Was it just last month, I think, that you shared pictures of yourself with the Duke of Makhubaskloof, and I wonder what went through your mind when the news broke that unfortunately he's no more.
Yeah, good morning, Adrian, and good morning to your listeners. Firstly, I think let's deal with the preliminaries first. He is qualified, or he would have been qualified to call me a friend, but I don't think I'm qualified to call him my friend. He was my elder. So we did have a special relationship, and indeed it came as a shock. In fact, I was sitting with friends somewhere, and after a game of golf, when all of a sudden my phone went abuzz with people sending me messages and screen grabs of his last tweet, which happened to have been my article that featured him in it. So it's still unbelievable, but as we go towards tomorrow to send him off, reality is starting to sink that indeed we have lost him.
Yeah, and in that article as well, which of course spoke about the history of Turfloop, what would his association be with the university?
So he was a student at the university. He never graduated from the university, but he was a student at the university before he could leave for Lesotho or for exile. So his activism actually blossomed at the University of the North then and now Limpopo, and that's where the harassment from the police started, and where his political consciousness was much more awakened and leading into him leaving the country to Lesotho and then other parts of the world.
Yeah, and the thing about what you point out in that article again is if you look at Turfloop and the diversity that came from Turfloop, considering the number of cultural groups that were represented and how that university actually catered for those, including you speak about Xitsonga-speaking people, Chivenda as well, and how would Tito Mboweni then find himself also having his own expression within the university?
Yes. So if you look at the University of the North at the time, it was specifically created to cater for a Venda and Tsonga and the Pedi-speaking people of this country. But it then became a melting point of many other languages and cultures, because people came from far in this country and outside the country, given that it then became their university that catered for the previously disadvantaged and people that were being excluded from other universities or who were not getting access due to one or the other form, but mainly based on political activism.
Yeah. Have you ever had a conversation with him if he ever thought and believed that one day he would be the man whose signature would become famous on the country's banknotes and becoming the Reserve Bank governor of the country, looking at the contrast of where he comes from and then eventually becoming the Reserve Bank governor of the most developed economy on the continent?
Look, over the last few months, we had become too close, and no week will pass without us conversing on one issue or the other. The issue about his development from being a minister, firstly being a member of parliament, then minister of labor, then come to be a special advisor to Chris Stolz, who was the governor at the point, governor number 7, and then subsequently taking over, did arise at some point. And it arose from a context of saying, in his view, we of younger generation tend to be much more impatient and want to take on roles much more quicker than we are ready for. And he indicated the fact that he started as a special advisor before he could be able to become a governor. And that allowed him to learn the ropes from those who have been there and build the necessary relationships and understand the organization quite better. By the time that he took over as the governor, he already knew what he wanted to do with the institution. For instance, Adrian, people ask me, what is the biggest one thing that he has done? And they single out this issue about his signature on the notes. Yes, it is significant as the first Black governor to do so. But if you look at the secrecy that the bank kind of operated at, and he arrived there and transform the institution and make it so transparent. He was the first governor to introduce a press conference after the MPC meetings. He was the one that implemented the inflation targeting, even though this was something that finance will say it is in our purview, but without his agreement, that will not have happened. He was the person that introduced the monetary policy forums across the country. So the Reserve Bank will go into all centers of the country to explain their decisions and all manners. Today, you have central banks in the world having something called, they don't call it the monetary policy forums, but they call it town halls. And those are the things that he has done. And if you look at those things, you then, and couple with the fact that he was the first governor to ensure that the speeches of the governor were translated into all official languages in the country. That ensured that the bank was accessible to everybody, even to those people in the far-flung areas of our country. So these are the things that really was very close to his heart. Yeah. And we discussed from there, what then do we do with this if you do leave at some point? Because this debate, this discussion, this arises.
Yeah, speak to us perhaps maybe around the design of our coins, the design of our banknotes, what his take on it was, and why it was important for the banknotes as well as our coins to be almost a representation of South Africa's diversity.
Look, I think what needs, the former governor will be uncomfortable with the view that it was his idea alone. He led a team in the central bank that, under his stewardship, was able to conceptualize a change, a transition from the past regime of apartheid into the new government that were a democratic government. And with that, what then became crucial is to say the bank can't remain an island in the sea of change that was happening. So the bank needed then to fit in terms of making its own contribution in making sure that even the coins and the notes are a representation of the cultures and what was happening in our own country.
Yeah, and then fast forward to 2008, it is the global financial crisis. Can you take us into the belly of the beast, those emergency meetings that were taking place, what was happening, and also how him, as well as the DG at the time, who's now actually the Reserve Bank governor, as well as Trevor Manuel, were trying to steer the ship?
Well, in 2008, I was not at the bank. So I will be speculating. I will be speaking from the other side. I was in the private banking sector. So from that perspective, I think I'm the governor of the Reserve Bank currently, Lesija Kganyago, is best placed to talk about those immediate meetings. I do know, but I will be speculating. So I rather not speculate, or rather have to speak on facts rather than speculations.
Yeah, and as we bid farewell to him tomorrow, what do you think his legacy is that he leaves behind, and what should our South Africans draw from the life that he has led?
I think South Africans will be able to draw from a life of a guy that could easily have lived the high life, but didn't. Chose to live amongst his own people, chose to care about how his people felt, related to them in the manner that they related. Governor Mboweni would, and you would have seen some of the pictures that we took, but when I relayed the messages that were coming through from people to say, but how can he do this? He was the first one to say, so what do we do this about this professor? And I said, well, maybe you go to a barber shop, and what he will go to a barber shop and then immediately decide to add a spice into it, put in some fleshy glasses, just to say, look, I'm trying to fit in. You're forcing me into doing these things because I want to be one of the people that seems to listen to people in the manner that our people want us to be able to behave. But crucial, Adrian, other than those light moments, is that it's the commitment to the lived experience of our people. As the Minister of Finance, and post his role as the Minister of Finance, he continued to talk about the a People's Bank. He continued to talk about issues around mining. He continued to talk about how best our people can participate in the economy meaningfully. But more crucially, he continued his commitment to education. And in fact, he had this conversation with Professor Tinyuko Maluleke that he wanted to do a formal doctorate. He has a number of a honorary doctorate, but he never called himself a doctor. Many people never knew that until recently when he had passed on. But he wanted to come into the business school and do a formal doctorate now that he had the time, just to do it, just to show and lead as an example that education is something that can be able to take us forward, even though he had achieved much of what he had achieved, and many people looked at him as a very successful person.
Okay, so 3 quick questions, Prof. 1, was his food good?
It depends on which day. It depends which day. But I can tell you that he was a very good cook.
Okay.
But some of the experiments were quite exciting to look, and some were very nice to enjoy.
Okay. Second, the shoes. Please explain to us why he insisted on those shoes. There's actually a picture that you had shared when your flight was delayed from the Polokwane airport, and people commenting on the shoes. Why those shoes? Has he ever spoken to you about those shoes?
No, we did many times. If you look at the pictures the latest pictures that I posted, there's a picture where I posted where he is saying, look at my shoes, because the shoes now were different. When they were clean, they were polished, and they were tied properly. And that comment came from the fact that those shoes he had worn at the airport, he had gotten quite of a bit backlash on. But his view was, if you knew Governor Mboweni at the time when he was governor, he was a very strict dressing person, and at the bank, people knew that they needed to dress in a particular way to represent the bank. When he was in his retirement, he wanted to fit in with the people that in his surrounding. So in Mahuasloop, it is mainly farmers. It is mainly workers that are around there. So it will not make sense really to be wearing fleshy shoes that you are going to worry about that they have gotten dirt or dust, whatever. So he could wander into any one of the farms and not to have to worry about the shoe he was wearing. But critically, he had an attachment with his Clark shoes. Whether old or new, he had an attachment to those.
Okay. And final one, how did Titus become Tito?
Well, I wouldn't be able to tell you that, but it is exactly what it is in his ID. It is Titus Tito Mboweni. So I look, I mean, Sam Shilowa can be able to tell you better than that, than me. As I say, it is one of those things that we tend to assume as we go.
Yeah. Okay, Prof. Mathebula, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate that. Former spokesperson of the Reserve Bank, and as he says there, that you cannot call yourself a friend of Tito Mboweni, but Tito Mboweni can call himself your friend.